Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over chapters 21 and 22 of J.D. Salinger's classic, The Catcher in the Rye. Alright, let's see what happens, shall we? Alright, let's dive into chapter 21. This chapter starts out with Holden telling the reader that he got lucky because the elevator boy was new, and he didn't know him. He tells the elevator boy to take him to the Dickenstein's floor, which Holden mentions is their neighbor across the hall. At first, the elevator boy doesn't want to let him up because he doesn't believe him. However, Holden makes up an excuse about his leg and how it needs to be propped up, and the elevator boy didn't bat an eye. Once Holden was upstairs, he limped along to their neighbor's doorway until the elevator was out of sight. Then he turns around and goes to the other side of the hallway to his own apartment. He said that luckily he was able to get through the door without waking anybody up. He also mentions that as he's walking down the hallway, he's being extra careful to be as quiet as possible. He said his father can sleep through anything, but his mother would wake up with the slightest cough or sneeze. He also says that he wasn't worried about the maid because she only had one eardrum. Holden tells the reader that when she was a child, her brother stuck a straw down her ear which punctured one of her eardrums. He then makes it back to Phoebe's room, and when he goes in, he realizes she's not there. Then he remembers, that's right, when DB's in Hollywood, Phoebe goes and sleeps inside his room. The reason being is because he had more space, and his bed was a lot larger. Phoebe liked to sleep in it. Holden also mentions that the desk that's in DB's room is also quite large, and Phoebe likes to do her homework on it, and she looks really funny doing it because she's so small and it's so big. He notices that she's asleep on his bed, and he turns the lamp on beside her. The light doesn't wake her up, and instead she continues to sleep for a little bit. Holden stands there watching her for a few moments and watching how peaceful she looks. He then goes over and sees the pile of books that are on DB's dresser. How there was an arithmetic book, geography book, spelling book, to which Holden notes that Phoebe was excellent in all of her studies, but she was really good at spelling. He also sees that there were a lot of notebooks around these books, and said that Phoebe had so many notebooks for a kid. So he opens one up and he reads all the little notes that she has written inside of it. He also notices that she signs the book Phoebe Weatherfield Caulfield. Holden mentions that she doesn't like her middle name, which is actually Josephine. So instead, every time he talks to her, she's always come up with a new middle name for herself. He also mentions that around the room, all of her clothes are neatly stacked away. He said that Phoebe was a very clean kid and always had her clothes folded and ready to go for the next morning. After this, he goes over to Phoebe and wakes her up, to which she's super ecstatic at the fact that Holden is there. She immediately asks Holden if he got her 5-page letter. He said he did, but didn't have time to respond. He tells the reader that the 5-page letter was about how she was in a school play, and she was super excited and wanted to know if Holden could come and see it. She tells Holden the play is called A Christmas Pageant for Americans, and that she had the biggest part. She goes on to describe the play and how she's Benedict Arnold, and how the ghost on Christmas Eve comes and asks if she's ashamed of everything she did for betraying her country, yada yada yada. She again asks Holden if he's going to be able to make it, and he says yes. She said that Daddy can't come because he has to fly to California. Then she switches the conversation and said that Mother said you'd be home on Wednesday. Holden responds that he got out early, and she couldn't be so loud because he doesn't want her to wake everybody up. She asks what time it is and says, Mom and Dad went to a Christmas party in Norwalk, Connecticut, and they brought the cars so they wouldn't have to worry about taking the trains. Phoebe then goes on to say that she watched a very special movie today called The Doctor at the Lister Foundation. She began to describe the movie and how the doctor mercy kills a cripple, they send him to jail. However, during the movie, the cripple comes back and visits the doctor and thanks him for what he did. Holden tries to redirect the conversation and it goes quiet for a little bit. Holden mentions that she has her pajamas on, ones that have red elephants on the collar, because elephants really knock her out. Holden then asks if the movie was any good, and she said that it was really good, except her friend Alice, who she saw it with, had a cold, and her mother kept asking her if she was alright during every important part of the movie. After this, Holden says that he brought her a record, but it unfortunately broke on the way home, and he pulls out the envelope and shows her all the pieces. Phoebe doesn't care and asks for the pieces, and she puts them inside the drawer of the nightstand. Holden asks if DB is coming home for Christmas, to which Phoebe responds that Mother said he may or may not. It all depends. She said that he may have to stay in Hollywood and write a picture about Annapolis. Holden thinks that is absolutely crazy because DB has never been to Annapolis, so how can he write a movie on one? Then he notices on Phoebe's arm a huge chunk of gauze that's been taped down. He also said he realizes this because the pajamas she had on didn't have sleeves. Phoebe said that a boy in her class named Curtis Weintraub pushed her down while they were going down the stairs at the park. She then asks Holden if he wants to see it, and she starts to remove the adhesive bandage off her arm. Holden says, no, leave it there. Why did he push you down the stairs? She said she doesn't really know. She thinks it's because he hates her. And Phoebe also said that her and this other girl named Selma Atterbury put ink all over his windbreaker, to which Holden said that wasn't a nice thing to do and you're not a child. Phoebe said that every time they were in the park, this guy keeps following her around and gets on her nerves. Holden said, well, it's probably because he likes you. And Phoebe said, I don't want to be liked by him. Then Phoebe says, how come you're not home on Wednesday? Which Holden tells the reader what she's trying to insinuate. He tells her that he got out early and that they let everyone out early, but Phoebe interrupts him before he can finish. She says, you got kicked out, didn't you? She then hits Holden on the leg and says, you did. And she got very emotional. Holden tries to say, no, I didn't, but Phoebe knows better and insists on saying that Daddy's gonna kill you. Holden says that Daddy won't kill me because I'll run away before then. He says that he knows someone that has a small ranch in Colorado and that he might just go out there and work on the horses. She then puts the pillow on her face and won't let go. Holden tries to get the pillow off of her face and calm her down, but she's not having any of it. Holden also mentions that when Phoebe has something stuck on her mind, she's gonna do it regardless. Finally, he gets up and goes into the living room and gets a pack of cigarettes out of the carton, and sticks it in his pocket because he was all out. This is where chapter 21 ends. Now, let's dive into chapter 22. Chapter 22 starts with Holden going back into DB's room where Phoebe was after he grabbed the pack of cigarettes. At this point, she had taken the pillow off her face, and when Holden goes down to try to talk to her, she moves her face to the other side. He asks her about Hazel Weatherfield and if she's written any new stories about her. Phoebe responds that Daddy will kill him. Holden reassures her that he will go out to Colorado and work on the ranch. She jokes and says, you don't even know how to ride a horse. To which Holden says, they can teach you in about 2 minutes. Then Holden notices her haircut and how bad it really is. He asks her who gave her the haircut and she said, none of your business, which sounded pretty snotty. She then says that she supposes he failed out every single subject again. To which Holden says, no, I passed English this time. He also tells the reader that her little behind was sticking out of the covers with the way that she was laying. So he goes over to pinch it. She then asks, why'd he do it? Referring to why he failed out of school again. To which Holden responds, please don't ask me that. He is sick and tired of everyone asking him that. He tells her that there was a million reasons why. From it being one of the worst schools to all the boys that were there who were terrible and phonies, and he jumped trains of thoughts. He then says that one boy named Ackley tried to join a secret fraternity that was on campus, but they wouldn't let him in because he was boring, and just a bunch of other different reasons. Holden goes on to say that even with the nice teachers on the faculty, for example Mr. Spencer, him and his wife were very nice, but Holden also mentions how even during Mr. Spencer's class, periodically the headmaster would come in, sit in the back of the room and heckle or make jokes, to which Mr. Spencer had to laugh and humor him. Phoebe interrupts him after this and says, please don't swear so much, Holden. Holden then goes on to mention about all the silly things that the school does annually and how it bothers him. Like for instance, on Veterans Day when all the old alumni of Pensy would come back and tour the campus with their families, daughters, etc., etc. He said that one year this old guy who came to the school actually knocked on Holden's door asking where the bathroom was. This is because he had hand-carved his initials on one of the doors and wanted to see if it was still there. So Holden and his roommate had to go down with him to the bathroom as he checked every single door. Holden mentions that this guy was wheezing and out of breath the entire time, and it was really kind of depressing. Phoebe then mumbles something about something into the pillow, so Holden asks her to repeat it. Phoebe says, you don't like anything that happens. Holden tries to reassure her that, yeah, I do, and she responds with, you don't like any schools, you don't like a million things, you don't like anything. Holden says that she's wrong, and so she tries to call him on his bluff, and says, okay, name one thing that you really like. Holden says that he was having trouble concentrating, and she kept asking him, name one thing you really like, but he was having trouble finding it. As Holden is trying to think of something he really likes, his mind goes to the two nuns that he met that morning with the basket for donations. And he goes on to talk about a boy from Elkton Hills named James Castle, and Holden talks about how he really admired James because he really believed in what he stood for. He said that one time he even got into some really big trouble for something he wouldn't take back. And he goes on to mention how James had called a guy very lousy and conceited. And Holden says that that guy and his friends went into James's room and locked the door. Holden said they tried to get him to take it back, but James wouldn't. And finally, it all ended when James jumped out the window and landed on the ground below. Holden says that he was in the shower when this happened and all he heard was the loud thud. He thought someone had dropped a desk or a radio out the window, but when he went to look, he saw James's face lying face first on the concrete, covered in blood and teeth everywhere. Holden said that James had died, and the worst thing the boys ever got was expelled from the school. They weren't even sent to jail or anything. Holden then says, while all that was going on, the funny part is that he really hardly knew James, just to be honest. Holden says that James was one of those quiet kids who he only knew from math class. Holden says no one ever called him up to the board, and the only thing distinguishable about him was the fact that he came before Holden on the call sheet. Phoebe snaps Holden from his thoughts and asks things. Can you think of one thing? Finally, Holden says, Allie. To which Phoebe responds, you can't choose Allie. Allie's dead. This really gets Holden heated, and he shouts back that he knows Allie's dead, and how come he can't like someone even if they've already died. He said Allie was much better than any person who's even living. He then goes on to say, well, I like it now, meaning right now, sitting here with you talking and horsing around. Phoebe responds, this isn't anything. To which Holden responds, it is something. And why is it not something? Holden says people never think anything is anything, really, and he's really goddamn sick of it. Phoebe then tells him to stop swearing. Then she says, name something you'd like to be. A scientist or a lawyer or something. Holden goes on to say that he couldn't be a scientist because he's not good at science, and then goes on about a lawyer and says that he wouldn't like to do that because his dad's one of those, and lawyers are supposed to help good guys get off, but most lawyers aren't in it for the right reasons. He said most lawyers just like to make a lot of money, play golf, drink martinis, and just be conceited. Then Holden goes on to say that even if the lawyer's intentions were good, were they really good? At what point do they become so righteous they end up being phony? After this, Phoebe just says, Dad's gonna kill you. He's going to kill you. Holden says he wasn't really paying attention to her at this point, and then says, you know what I'd like to be? He said, if I had the goddamn choice. And Phoebe interrupts and says, stop swearing. But he continues on and says, you know that song, if a body catch a body coming through the rye? To which Phoebe interrupts him and says, the line's actually if a body meet a body coming through the rye. She said it's a poem by Robert Burns. And Holden's like, I know it's a poem. Future Holden then interjects and says, well, she was right. The lyrics are actually if a body meet a body instead of a body catch a body. However, he continues and he says he keeps picturing all these little kids playing some sort of game in a big field of rye. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around. Nobody big, that is, except for Holden. And he says that he would love to be standing on the edge of a cliff, and his job would be to catch anybody if they start to go over. He says that's what he liked to do all day. He would like to be the catcher in the rye. He said he knows it's crazy, but that's the only thing that he really would like to be. Phoebe doesn't really have a response to this, except going back and saying, Dad's gonna kill you. Holden says, I don't give a damn if he does. He says the worst thing he can do is take him to military school. Holden then tells the reader that he wanted to call up his English teacher from Elkton Hills, Mr. Antolini, and that now he lives in New York because he quit Elkton Hills and is teaching at NYU. Or he tells Phoebe he has to make a phone call and he'll be right back, and to not go to sleep. Holden says he knew she wouldn't, but he just wanted to say it to make sure. As he's leaving, Phoebe catches his attention, and she tells him she's taking belching lessons from a girl named Phyllis Margiles. And then she tries to burp, and Holden really can't hear anything, but he tells her, you did a good job. And then he goes out to the living room and calls up his English teacher from Elkton Hills. This is where chapter 22 ends. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, stay lit.